us up high. Turn it up, it's time. Tall boy on the line. Everything will last. Raise your...
Welcome back to episode 247 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And as we hardly ever say, but we do today, who knows where it goes when the non-alcoholic beer flows? Well, it's flowing to the man who drinks it every week. Dave, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you very much. And yes, non-alcoholic every week, almost entirely non-alcoholic. Yeah, I'm good. My car is currently in the garage, so I got here early today. I'm a bit of a nightmare with the car, so I haven't been able to go to the office. So a nice, easy day at home today.
Jobs are good, and so we know if we need him to be on time every week, all we need to do is slash his tyres. So.
Well, not really. I could just change a tyre.
Well, I don't know about that, Dave. So tonight we are joined by another guest, a guest who's going to be talking to us about something that we probably know very little about, if we're going to be utterly honest, Dave being the exception for that. Sobriety. Jack, did you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about, well, you've got a very interesting career. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that first?
Hello. And before we start, I just realised that the background to the video here is actually beer, which is very apt.
I should have updated that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I grew up in Alsager, in not so sunny Cheshire or Stoke-on-Trent, depending whether you want to be posh or not. And it's disappeared. you drank it all. But yeah, I haven't had the most conventional life myself, I guess. I left school when I was 14. Even when I was going to school, I didn't go to school very often. And finally, they told me to piss off, get out. It wasn't looking too good for them. And but it's because from a young age, I found passion for playing the drums, specifically jazz drumming. So yeah, it was in my family. My dad was a jazz drummer, my granddad. So yeah, I'm a jazz drummer. Left school at age 14, went on the road, and started my professional career, and never looked back since. So yeah, that's what 16, 17 years ago now. So.
I mean, that is, it's unusual. We do get some people with some interesting careers on the podcast, but I don't think, well, we've maybe had 2 or 3 musicians. So I think you're maybe the 3rd musician. However, certainly our first jazz musician. Did you want to tell us what that entails? Obviously, we know about the drums. We know, obviously, it is a very, very specific skill, and it's something you definitely need a rhythm for, something that Dave and I certainly do not possess. But yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about it and the places in the world that it takes you to?
Yeah, well, I guess it's like any type of music, really. It has its own niche. Actually, in the UK, it's one of the best jazz scenes in the world. I'd say the main places right now for music, really, but specifically jazz are London, New York, and I'd say Paris is the other one in Europe. And so we're incredibly lucky and to be in an environment like that from a young age, because jazz, as we know, is quite a dying art form. It has an older demographic compared to more popular music. But so, yeah, it's I guess people think, the rock and roll lifestyle is for rock and roll music and all that kind of stuff. But actually, it all started in jazz. So there's a lot of that in it. There's a lot of, debauchery, I like to call it. So, yeah, but like any type of music, being on the road, it's not glamorous. People think, it's great. I've had the pleasure to go to all countries all over Europe and Scandinavia and other places, and it must be so good traveling so many days a year. And it's like, well, you don't really get to see anywhere apart from the inside of a bus or a plane. And but it's the best job in the world to sit on stage, make people happy, do what I love doing. I would not change it. So yeah, it's been a pretty exciting life. There's a lot of stories, a lot of experiences. Some, I'm a pretty honest person, but some I probably will never repeat live on the internet. I might get arrested, but but no, it's been a fun life so far. But yeah, it's led me astray, which is, I think, partly what we're going to talk about at some point.
Yeah, indeed. So like you say, in terms of sort of jazz, when you think about jazz, you do think about, well, I certainly think of sort of the, maybe the 20s and 30s. I think of New Orleans, I think of Prohibition, I think of cocktails, and I think of all the things that go hand in hand when you've had far too much to drink and there's members of the opposite sex around, you know what I mean? So it's for me, yeah, I get the links there. So in terms of yourself then, now you've obviously taken a path into sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
And guessing I'm not guessing because I've seen many of your stories that you share on Instagram, and that is in part to the lifestyle that you were living as a jazz musician and the other stuff that you do alongside it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that journey and how it started off? Be as honest or as candid as you like. We don't mind.
So I said about my granddad and my dad both being professional drummers. So my dad sadly died at the age of 32, which is my age right now, through bad lifestyle, let's say, but probably drink and smoking too many cigarettes. And then my granddad died at the age of 62, which again still isn't very old. If you saw a picture of him, you'd think he would have been about 100. But he drank serious amounts. So we're not just talking a few pints every night. We're talking like 25 pints and plus every night. But in the music industry, that's very acceptable and actually very encouraged. I think like alcohol in general, compared to any drug, it's encouraged, but especially in the music industry and especially back in the old days. But yeah, so when I growing up, becoming a drummer, I was 4 when my dad died, and then when my granddad died, I was about 11, I think. So all I knew, I had drums in the house, and I had the records, and I saw these pictures of them, and I heard these stories about my family getting shit-faced. And I thought, well, to become a professional jazz drummer, you practice a lot, which I was really good at that, and you also drink a lot, and I was really fucking good at that as well. And people say that I have in my blood the drumming thing, and I think I do. It's very, it's uncanny, some of the similar traits I have looking at pictures and videos and stuff, but also the drinking. I had a very high tolerance for drinking from the age of about 13, 14. That's when I really started. I guess my professional drinking career started with my professional music career. So yeah, basically it started off very fun, as it often does. I never started because I had real big issues necessarily. I did it because I thought that's what you're meant to do in life. And so yeah, I guess from the age of 14 to about 18, it was really fun. But then shit started hitting the fan at the age of 18. So yeah, that was at the time when I really started thinking about my drinking, thinking, this is not so fun. But I continued to do it until, another 7 years after that. I got sober finally when I was 25 after a lot of stuff happening. And a lot of failed attempts at sobriety.
I think that's the nature of addiction. Now, I used to smoke, and I know when I gave up smoking years ago now. So I'm 51, although you're looking at me now and thinking I'll maybe look a little bit like your granddad. But yeah, I gave up smoking maybe 30 years ago, something like that, maybe 25, 30 years ago. And I had many, many failed attempts in doing so. It was a case of, right, I'll start when I'll start. Funnily enough, most of those involved alcohol. When I go have a beer, and actually, do you know what? The natural progression as well. When I drink, I smoke, amongst other things, and I'm going to do that as well. So that was. I get it. So I get it. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy your beer. Am I addicted? I don't know. Maybe we'll explore that journey tonight. Dave, stop raising your eyebrows. So because that's the nature of addiction, and that's what I have to ask you about first. Is recognizing it. What was at what point did you realize actually this is a problem?
So this is about the most common question I get asked by everyone actually, is like, what actually was it? What made you stop? Or what made you realize you had a problem? And it's really rarely one thing amongst. I'm very active in the sober community online and in person, and I surround myself by sober people now. And it's normally compounding, it's like one thing, another thing, and eventually the small things become big things. And then, so for me, I think, for one, I was very ill. There was times when I remember I used to play at a festival in the Swiss Alps, a place called Davos, and we'd be there for a week, and it was pretty high altitude, so we'd all put down feeling weird to the high altitude. But it really, for me, it was nothing to do with that. It was the fact that I was drinking 3 bottles of scotch a day and drinking bottles of red wine. And I remember one time I was coming back we drove over to take the gear, and my good friend who was driving at the time, he said, "Jack, you all right?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I think so." And I was hunched over in the passenger seat, very yellow, and like, I think I got very lucky that my body never entirely gave out. So there's a lot of things, there's hundreds of stories like that. But the biggest thing for me was the mental health aspect of it. I never cared so much about actually dying. I've never been scared of dying. And I guess in the end, it became self-harm. And I think a lot of drinking is self-harm. But the mental aspect was always so much more painful than the physical aspect. And living in a head of chaos, and that kind of pain and depression and what turned out to be anxiety. There was one time I was on the way back from a gig after a massive week-long bender of no sleep, basically. That's the other thing. I wasn't just into alcohol. I was into copious amounts of cocaine as well, which alcohol, like you were saying with the cigarettes, is the enabler. It lowers inhibitions to then think, oh, fuck it, I'll go and get some cocaine or whatever it was. And then the cocaine would make it so I could carry on drinking even more, because that's always what I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to do was drink. But there was one time coming back from a gig in Leeds, and I was sobering up. And on the gig, I thought I was dying. I walked off stage, and I went into the backstage room, and I looked in the mirror, and I was totally yellow again. And I was like, oh, fuck. I was like, this could be it. And I sat out the rest of the gig. I just lay down on the floor. I managed to get the drums back in the car after the show, and I was driving on the M62, the high road in the UK somewhere. And I remember all my left hand started going numb. And then all my left eye, I was like, oh, shit, here we go. This is it. It's the heart attack. And then my whole body and the chest pain. So I pulled over and I called the ambulance, called 999. I said, I'm having a fucking heart attack. Bear in mind, I was only, I think, 19 at this time. And anyway, they said, okay, we'll send an ambulance right away. And they tried to talk me down. But the ambulance took, from what I remember, it's quite blurry, but quite a long time to come. And I totally accepted the fact I was going to die. I thought, okay. And at that point, I was calming down. Because I accepted it, my heart rate lowered. To cut a long story short, the ambulance got there. They did a load of tests on me. He said, you just had the most panic attack. And after that, I didn't leave the house. I managed to I had to book a hotel, and the ambulance followed me back. And but I didn't leave the house for about a month. And that was all the anxiety and the depression side. So, yeah, there's that side of it. There's the physical health. I would have died. I wouldn't be here right now had I not stopped drinking. That was certain. When I finally went to the doctor when I knew I needed to get help, and they said, so what were you drinking or taking? And I was totally honest for the first time ever. And they were literally speechless. And after a second, they said, yeah, you're actually a walking, talking miracle. You should be dead. You should have just completely overdosed on alcohol through acute liver failure, which has happened to one of my friends. One of my friends survived, thankfully, but a lot of my friends have died through that way. So in the end, I think all these things happened. I tried to stop so many times, and I tried to moderate, which for someone with an addict mentality in every sense, it's never really going to work. And I couldn't take any more, and I surrendered to it, I guess, and I finally asked for help. I could be here all night telling you stories and reasons why I stopped drinking. But that's a brief look into it.
Wow. So I mean, here's the thing. So Dave, as I introduced at the start, just for anybody who's watching the video, I should say we're not being unreasonable. We are enjoying some non-alcoholic beverages. Dave, as he always does. I've actually got a non-alcoholic cider, which is the first time I've drank one of these in my life. And I got to tell you, actually pretty good. I'm not going to say I can't tell the difference, but it actually tastes better than a lot of ciders I've drank. It's really decent. So, Dave, you're not a drinker, but your story is quite different. You've always sort of abstained mostly from alcohol. You've never really been a big drinker, have you, dude?
No, not to any quantities. I mean, even when we were younger and we were going out at 17, 18, 19, 20, whatever, I was the one that was called the lightweight. And I always took that view that meant that, well, I'll have 4 pints, 5 at a push, and you and Gaz might be on 6, 7, 8 maybe. And I'm thinking, well, you're spending more money and you're just making yourself feel a bit grotty. So I've never been a big drinker. I've never pushed myself so that I could tolerate more. I've only ever thrown up 3 times from excessive drinking. Twice was with Adam and Gaz. So they're to blame for those occasions. But about 4 years ago, I was doing, I think it was just dry January, me and the wife just did dry January. And that I found reasonably straightforward. And the following year, just extended it and ended up being, I think something like 64 days. And then the following year, I just stopped. And I think with me, it was, I think I'd go through cycles where you'd drink hardly anything, and then you'd go, well, okay, so I'll have a beer on a Friday night and a bottle of wine. And then the Saturday, you perhaps have a couple of beers and a couple of glasses of wine. The same on Sunday. And then Monday night, you've got the rest of that wine bottle to finish. So I'm talking like 7 or 8 bottles of beer and maybe 2 bottles of wine a week, which of course is not a lot at all. It's too much, but not a lot at all. But that for me became, you know what, almost every day I'm having something, even if it was just half a glass of wine. I thought, I don't need it. And talking to a colleague at work who was just talking about alcohol and just saying, no matter how much alcohol you drink, it's just not good for you. It's bad for your body. So, okay, there's arguments that, the psychological benefits, it can relax you, therefore you socialize more, therefore you're happier, therefore the overall good is there, but the underlying toxins and alcohol is just not good for your body in a physical sense. So I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to stop. So I stopped. It will be 2 years ago this Christmas completely. And I say completely, brother-in-law comes up at Christmas. He always brings some really nice wine. So Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and Boxing Day, I have like 1 standard glass of red wine. So I don't abstain as in, I'm not touching it, but I just have that 1 glass with the meal because he takes the effort to bring it. And that's it. That's me done.
Mm-hmm. Quite a different story to yours, Jack, there, but I wanted to hear Dave's opinion just because, there are 2 sides to every coin there. But one thing that Dave mentioned, which I think was interesting, was and this goes to your mental health, which we talked about a little bit earlier there. So one of the things I am very aware of, someone who's naturally quite shy, I know I have used alcohol in the past for my social anxiety, and I've seen your Instagram stuff, and it's something that did resonate with me in terms of it's something you've done. It gives you, I don't know if confidence is the right word, but it certainly lowers your inhibitions. 2 different things, I suspect. But so you sort of, it led to sort of severe anxiety for yourself through the negative health parts. But I'm guessing you started off using it a little bit as well to give you that kick, give you that buzz, and to help you with social anxiety. Am I correct?
Yeah. So I think one thing I just wanted to say, I think a lot of people can listen to my story and the quantities I was drinking, or I don't have a problem then, or my story is insignificant. And I think if you're unhappy with any amount you're drinking, that could be 1 glass of wine a week. And if you can't control that, or it doesn't make you feel good or whatever, that's not good, So, I just wanted to say, everyone has different stories and all of them are just as important. Mine sounds crazy just because of my nature of my brain, I think. I'm the abnormal story. What much more common is, I guess, David's story or people drinking much less than me. which can be a problem because people look at me and think, shit, this guy's on the floor, totally yellow, about to die. So it's easier sometimes for someone like me to get help or to be taken seriously. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that. But yeah, the confidence thing is a real big one because that's really loosely used actually. Oh yeah, I actually made a post about it just before this. But to sort of relax or to loosen up a bit and to go and do something, it's like, well, it does. It works. Alcohol, I'm not, as much as I now have come to fucking hate alcohol, it's also fucking wonderful. Like, there's a reason why I did so much of it, and it's because you can walk into any situation and feel fucking great, and you lose all that sense of anxiety and insecurity, and it makes you feel like the most important person in the world, and especially when you put cocaine into that mix. So that's really fucking powerful. But the problem is what I found. So when I stopped, I was so worried about how I was going to socialize, how would I do anything without it, basically. How would I talk to people? How would I go on a date? How would I have sex? All these things. How would I even play the drums? I learned to play drunk. And I'm not going to lie, at the start, it was ridiculously hard. When I stopped, it got much worse before it got better. And the socialize, I didn't do AA, the conventional support of stopping drinking. I didn't do that initially. And I had I guess the more modern approach of still going to the pub, even though I was sober. Within the first 100 days of getting sober, I thought, well, I don't want to lose all my friends and lose all this shit. But to go into that situation when I was known as the piss artist and the best drinker and wherever, and people coming up to me like, why aren't you drinking? Go on, just have one. Just to actually have the resilience to say no in those situations, I understand why people don't stop drinking. And also, even me now, I'm one of the most confident people in the world, naturally. And to walk into a pub when it's on a Saturday night at 9 p.m, full of a load of pissed blokes and women and sort of really obnoxious, especially in the UK, it's a very loud, obnoxious culture in certain places on a Saturday night, or most nights, to be honest. And alcohol brings you down a level to deal with that situation. And I've finally come to realize that I can't deal with that situation sober. So I don't often put myself in that situation. But through my journey, I guess, if you want to call it that, I realized alcohol over the long run depletes your confidence and gives you more anxiety. So in the short term, it's great. But it takes more and more to get to that, the more and more you do it. And at the same time, when you're not drinking, your anxiety is going up and up and up and up because your body needs that drug. And then you rewire your brain. So if you go into, say, a social situation when you're a kid, you're really nervous, you're 16 years old, and you have a drink and it all gets better, you're just telling your brain and the pathways that, oh, this really works. So then if you carry on doing that, that's what you think works. So then you remove that situation becomes even harder than it should be. So doing the work to rewire the brain going the other way, it's ridiculous now how much more confidence I do have. And I used to be so shy and reserved, even when I was drunk, really, in a sense of I wouldn't like to be in a big group of people, and I still don't. But now I'm happy to talk to everyone as a group, whereas before I would have shied away from that. And so, yeah, it's because again, in the UK, it's a real big issue. But from a young age, we see our parents, we see our family members with our friends socializing, and alcohol is the epicenter of the social because the pub. And it's changing quite a bit now. But then we learn that way. So that's all we know. But actually, if you remove it and you do the work on yourself and deal with your own insecurities and anxieties, it actually goes the opposite way and you become much more confident, which that it takes a lot of trust, I think, for that. So yeah, that's a hell of a topic.
I can resonate to that, Jack, having been someone who drank, and then like Adam, I'm a bit of an introvert by nature. I'm never the life and soul of the party. I'm more of a listener and join in sort of person when the time's right, rather than driving the conversation. But what I noticed is that drinking helps you to join in the conversation sooner. But actually, when you don't drink, what I've found is actually there's no sort of, it does lower the anxiety. You just feel better from the start. And I find that the conversations then go, if you're with a group of friends, say, either goes one or two ways, depending on where you are and that group of friends and probably how much they're drinking. But if it's just you're out with your mates and you're just having a chat and it's that kind of environment and other people are drinking, after 2-3 hours, you find that they are getting tipsy or drunk, but actually you're enjoying the conversation more from being sober. You sort of see it through a different pair of eyes. It's like a different interaction, and you kind of had a sense of satisfaction that you're kind of sort of level and calm and stable, and you're taking it all in, and people around you are getting a bit louder and a bit leery and saying more than they normally would. The other side is if it gets too bad, it can become really horrible, where you want to actually extract yourself away from it because everything irritates you a lot more. So I don't see much of the latter, but I have experienced it. But they're my sort of being sober amongst a group of friends that are drinking. It tends to go one of those two ways. But first is much better than when you were drinking yourself. That's how I find it anyway.
Yeah, and I always think the one thing I stick by in my head, if you need a drink to do something, you probably shouldn't be doing it, and it's not worth your time. So if that means you need a drink to have a conversation with someone to bring you down to that level of conversation, well, it's probably not worth having that conversation or being in that place. If you need a drink to go into the pub or a drink to go into any situation, I think, well, the situation probably isn't very good. Or you have an insecurity, you need to be working on. So yeah, it's I totally agree. There's two sides to the thing. I think when it gets to a certain time in the night, the conversations go a slightly different way, depending on your company. So
that's a fair comment. That is a fair comment. So just out of interest, then, when you first started going, in those first 100 days of sobriety, and you were going to the pub, were you doing that to challenge yourself, just to see, I can do this, trying to prove it to yourself?
I was doing it because I was lonely.
Right.
Being totally honest, because I didn't know to sit in. I really struggled to do any gigs at that time. I was so depressed, seriously depressed. And I thought, well, what do I do on a Saturday night when I normally would be working? All my mates are at the pub and I'm sat home on my own. So I didn't really know, didn't have any other options. I didn't know what to really do. And the voices in my head were so powerful. I thought it's better just to go to the pub and be around noise at that time. So yeah, I guess that's why I was going. Looking back, I wish I had more support, or more options to go other places, or that's improved a lot. I've been sober now just over 6 years, and that's improved a lot in that time. There's a lot more support. But yeah, but no, it was loneliness. Looking back.
Right. That's I guess I suppose if you're in a situation where you're constantly socializing, then it's difficult to take that away. And if all your friends are drinking, just out of interest, then you said a lot of your friends were big drinkers as well, and unfortunately you've lost a few of those. Did anybody else see your journey or decide to get sober alongside you?
So in terms of my friends from home, who I grew up with, a couple of them who are the ones I still keep in touch with, I'm not sure if they're necessarily inspired by my journey, but I think they're on that kind of path anyway, and they're very conscious about it. One friend is someone who did get in serious trouble with it, who's now sober, who I spoke to a lot, obviously, at the time of all that. Again, that was through reach the end of the road. It was life or death. So that, yeah, I think that's what really inspired him, to be honest, was there was no other choice. But in terms of the music side, and the social media side, the people I've met outside my hometown, because a lot of my friends who I was going to the pub with and all that, who I grew up with, I realized in the end, all I had in common was the drinking and the drugs. So I came to realization at some point after a couple of years or so that I needed to move on from that. So I actually, it sounds brutal, but I assessed a lot of my situations socially. I thought, well, what is doing me good and what's doing me harm? And it's like, if you're a vegan, you wouldn't work in a butcher's, would you? You don't see many vegetarian butchers around, really. So, yeah. But on the other side of stuff, a lot of people message me off the back of social media or come up to me from the music side of stuff, especially since more recently I've got heavily involved in talking out loud about sobriety, and quite controversially, on purpose to hit nerves and to generate conversation, you know. And actually, it's one of the best feelings in life is to have someone send me a message or to come up to me in person and just say, you've really helped. Because selfishly, me talking about stuff like this right now helps me with my sobriety and helps to reaffirm why I'm sober. And it's like therapy, you know. So, and if I can do that and spread awareness and it helps other people, well, it's a fucking win-win. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. That's great. You know, we've had a couple of people on in the podcast in the past, and you know, we do some fun episodes, but we also do some serious episodes as well. We've done mental health as well, haven't we, Dave? We've had stuff to talk on. We've looked at homelessness. We had a guy called Al Shapon who creates videos about mental health and helping people think differently about people who think differently. And you know, it is that sort of provoking a conversation out of people. If you're sharing something on social media like that, which is maybe a little bit out of the norm, in terms of, you know, a lot of the time when you're looking at dealing with alcoholism or any other form of addiction, you look at the figures. You know, you start to look at the figures and people share the facts and the statistics and the benefits to your health. Sometimes, you know, having those sort of thought-provoking conversations, which you can chuck out on social media like you do, I think is really, really important, because it actually gets people to think, actually, this guy isn't that different to me. And maybe some of his experiences that he's talking about are ones that I've experienced in the past, and I should probably be looking at this journey myself. And, you know, then they start to explore what help is out there. So, you know, you said yourself then at first you didn't go down the old Alcoholics Anonymous road. Is that did you use AA, or was there other help out there available for you?
So the story of how I actually stopped was, I have a very good friend called Adrian Cox, who's a fellow musician, who I'd known previously to sobriety all my life, from a really young age. He's a bit older than me. He's 10 years older than me. But he was an absolute monster when it came to drinking and everything, in terms of debauchery again, I guess. And we used to party a lot, and then he actually got sober and he drifted off and we lost a bit. We were always in contact, but again, you don't socialize with those type of people. You know, if you're a drinker, you want another drinker to drink with you to make you feel better about yourself. So, but when I finally realized, like, shit, this is it, I didn't really know where to go. And he came to mind. I was like, he's the only properly sober person I know who's speaking about it. And so I sent him a message and asked him for help. And I said, look, man, I'm absolutely fucked. And I do not know what to do. And I was up in Alsager at the time, and he lived in London. And he said, right, I'm coming to you right now. And I said, look, no. I was like, I'll come to London. I could do really getting away from here. So I got a train down to London straight away. And we went out and we sat down, and he said, right, he said, you're not going to believe anything I'm saying right now. But he's like, you just have to fucking trust me. And it's true. I didn't think there was any hope. I was right on the bottom, you know, and I was just like, there was just something a little bit of self-worth left, I guess, to want to try and help myself. And he said, you just got to trust that if you do the work and do the things I'm going to say to do, that it will work. And he said it's going to take a really fucking long time. But he said it is totally worth it, and it is the best thing you'll ever do. Anyway, so luckily I trusted him, but the first thing he said was to go to the doctors, and he said they will be fucking useless. So like just a normal GP basically, and go and say, hey, I have a problem, I need help, I'm an alcoholic. And he said because even though I was a total mess, people think of alcoholics and drug addicts as people on the street, which is really sad because the vast majority of people with addictions are people who are like businessmen. They could be making millions of pounds a year, or doctors, nurses, firefighters, police officers, musicians, athletes, you know, they're everywhere. But he said to me, dress down, make yourself look even shitter. So they try and take you seriously. And especially I was 25. So you're walking into the GP and said, oh, I'm an alcoholic. They're like, oh, fuck off. And that was totally the response I had, which was actually really frightening. And yeah. So, but the whole point of it was to go in there and admit to someone that I had a problem. And so basically the help I got to start with was via Adrian. He was like, I guess, my unofficial sponsor in that sense. And I followed the same path as he did to get help. And he supported me throughout the whole journey. And to this day, he's my best mate. And he's now 10 years sober. And but since that, I found other sober communities online that were starting to evolve. I remember quite early on, I read a really fantastic book called The Unexpected Joys of Being Sober by an author called Catherine Gray, who had stopped, I think it was like a couple of years prior, and she basically just wrote her story, and she was a functioning alcoholic like myself. And just reading that book and being able to relate to someone, I think, shit, I really relate to that. And going out to like these events and you have free drinks, like being a musician, you'll just go and there's just crates of champagne and and all these things. And so that really helped. And then I think it was after about a year or so, I went to a few AA meetings. And AA is, I guess, quite scary for someone at that stage in their drinking career. It's fucking scary now. Walking into a room full of people who you don't know, who you respect because they're all there for the same reason, holding your hands up and speaking to everyone, telling you the most personal things. There's nothing more humbling than that, and to sit and listen to people's stories. And more recently, here I live near Lisbon, now in Portugal. I've been going to a few meetings in Lisbon, and the things what I've learned from that, and I now feel able to accept that, and I have the confidence to go into those things. So my journey, I sort of dipped in to things, and it's now actually in the last year I really believe in getting into the more spiritual side of it, I guess. And that doesn't mean necessarily conventional religion, which is how AA started, but just actually doing the work inside to repair this, which then repairs the rest of your body. So simple things like affirmations and gratitude, really simple things, living in the now, you know, and being grateful for simple things like having a pair of fucking legs. Like, just, we take that for granted, or the sun being out, it's like, or riding my motorbike. So yeah, my journey has been through help of individual people, really. More recently, I've dabbled in AA, and I have a good network of people. I've been very fortunate, and I was so lucky that I had one person to reach out to and say, hey, I'm fucked. Can you help me? Because not everyone has that. So I was extremely lucky.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's I guess you need someone like that, don't you, Dave? It's what are your thoughts on it, Dave? When you listen to this story, I don't know, what your dealings with addiction in the past, or knowing people with addiction more to the point, where you've come into contact with them is probably the better way of wording it. Is there? I mean, I'm asking. Is there enough help out there? You're lucky you had Adrian, who's a good friend of yours, to help out. Is there enough help out there for people who are struggling? And if not, what more needs to be done?
I mean, to answer your question, I don't have a. I mean, Jack, you said earlier you've got a very addictive personality. I think was your words. Everything is, addiction is what drives you. I think that's the kind of words you use. Is that's how you approach life, and I'm not like that at all. So, when I decided I wasn't going to drink anymore, I found it quite straightforward. And whenever I set my mind to something, as long as I've got a good reason for doing it, it's quite straightforward. And I mean, I don't know anybody that's addicted or has been through anything like what you've been through, Jack, to answer your question, Adam. But the question I was going to ask, Jack, was that journey you've just described, and Adam touched on it in terms of what support is out there. I mean, how much there's some people out there that would say you're an alcoholic, you just need a bit of willpower, it's all your fault. And then there's some people that will, at the other end of the spectrum, will say it's an absolute illness and there's no way you can do it on your own. And I guess that it's different for different people, but the truth of it is somewhere in between those two. You probably can't do it without some self-discipline and willpower, but you probably also can't do it with some help.
Yeah, so I think it all starts with belief. You have to believe or have at least trust that it can get better. So I'm someone who's obsessed with health and all that shit. Now I've gone the total other way. And a lot of people say, well, how do you have the discipline to stop whatever it is I'm stopping at the time? And I say, well, you have to have the discipline to create the habit. Once you've got the habit formed and you've rewired the brain, well, then it gets much easier. It's the same with alcohol or drugs or whatever. It's different for everyone. Everyone's like, well, how long does it take to form the habit? It's like, do you know what I mean? If you've been drinking for 15 years, you're not going to form a new habit in 2 weeks, which is what people expect. So, yeah, it's a hard one, really. It's very different for everyone. And if you're in the midst of, say, a heroin addict, or someone who's drinking serious amounts, if you just stop drinking, there's a really good, strong chance you'll die because your body can't function without the drug. Stuff like cocaine is a mentally addictive drug, so that won't kill you. So I think that everyone does really need help and at least some advice. And it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But what I do know, in the UK, here in Portugal, actually, it's very good from what I've heard. But in the UK, there is not enough help out there from the National Health Service. But again, that's a whole different conversation. And that, do you know what I mean? I'm not knocking it for that. And the thing is, a GP who has never experienced addiction, why would they know anything about fucking addiction? And the most important thing is when you go and get help for any addictions, you need to speak to someone who totally understands because they've been through it themselves. And at the moment, it's quite worrying, actually. There's a lot of, on social media, people promoting themselves as sober coaches or addiction coaches. And some of these people have been sober for not even a year. And I think, shit, I'd only just got over suicidal thoughts after a year. And I thought, if someone was paying me, and I thought, oh, yeah, I'm doing really well, which I was. But it's quite worrying, the unofficial help what's out there, because you don't necessarily have to be certified in that area. So it's such a grey area. And I think in the UK especially, I can only speak for the UK because that's where I have my experience, but it needs to be a bit more regulated by something. So, yeah, I've got a long story with the NHS, and yeah, it's not the most pleasant one via this experience. But again, I think like with every service in the NHS, it's underfunded. So what do you expect? Mental health isn't necessarily more important than cancer, So yeah, it's a really difficult question to answer.
And I guess, sorry, I was going to say, and I guess the thing is, and again, you touched on it there, is that it's not it's not as straightforward as I'm not going to drink anymore. I've got a bit of willpower. Right, I've stopped, because it's the body, the chemical side in the body. And I remember once I was in a session with someone, they were talking about the habit forming in the brain and how the I've got a terrible memory, so I can't remember the technical words, but basically the bit, he's laughing at me, the bit of brain that says, I need to get from here to here, and the neurons, it goes the shortest way. And the more you do it, the shorter and stronger and the more direct that route is. And then over time, if you want to change that behavior, you can't just decide you're going to change it. You've got to train your brain to do something different until the other way becomes the stronger, the more direct route. And that takes time. So it's not easy. And then you've got the mental health side of it, because that's a massive issue in its own right. And you could have multiple facets of mental health challenges because of the drinking. So you've got the physical side, the social side, the actual neurons in your head, and then the wide spectrum of mental health challenges you're going on. And because I'm guessing it needs to be continuous. If you see somebody and they say, right, what you need to do is this, that, and the other, and the support's not there a week later, you go back to ground one, you start again. And if you don't have that continuation of care, then it's very, very difficult. If you're coming from a place, from certainly where you were, or from where you were, and quite a few stages not as bad as you, it's still quite difficult, I would imagine.
Well, I think the most important thing in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and NA, Narcotics Anonymous, all these A groups are statistically the most widely used and most proven form, or the best way of recovering and abstaining from whatever you're trying to give up. That's fact. And it's community. And community is a really powerful thing. And especially when, look at COVID is a really good example. Us in the Western world, we're losing community. Sadly, we're sort of separating. And but when COVID happened initially, everyone started helping each other. It was fucking fantastic. And people are actually being nice to each other because we're all in it together, So when you walk into a room and it's full of people who know how I think or how you think, and you can relate to each other, that feels like a warm feeling, And it's a simple thing of just being able to sit down, have a chat, and think, fucking hell, yeah, that really resonates with me. So I think the most, like you were saying, ongoing support, you need community. And I think that goes wider than addiction. I think we all need community. And I think it's something we're losing again in the West. If you look at places which thrive or communities which thrive are the ones who stick together, Look at animals, look at ants. It's ridiculous. I think we got a lot to learn from fucking ants. It's ridiculous. And this is coming from someone who has been alone on my own most of my life, and I do things on my own, and I live on my own. I moved to Portugal on my own. And I've just come to realize, shit, community in every sense, and especially addiction and recovery, is, I think, the most important thing.
It's a really, really good point, that is, isn't it? That is a really, really good point. Something I hadn't really thought about, but yeah, when you think about Alcoholics Anonymous, you think about the process, the 12-step program that you have. But I guess the key thing to it all, and the key thing that we're hearing from your journey, is surrounding yourself with people. I saw you used a phrase on Instagram that I read somewhere on one of your posts, is you become the average of the people you surround yourself with. And I thought, you know what, that's a really interesting way of looking at things as well. Did you want to expand on that a little bit, and how that's, obviously you spoke a little bit how you've changed the people around you, but
Yeah, well, again, it's a bit like, if you figure out what your goal is in life, and if my goal, which it was for a long time, was to get pissed and fall over, well, where's the best place to do that? The pub, because it's acceptable at the pub, or even on stage, to be honest. And then, okay, who shall I surround myself to do that with? Because one, I need to surround myself to make me feel better, because drinking on your own is deemed a bit bad, So it's better to surround yourself with people. So they said, well, you're not going to surround yourself with people who are sober. if I was the drinker, I'm myself now is my previous self's worst fucking nightmare. And it works the total opposite way as well. So like me, I'm really into fitness. I play tennis competitively. So if I want to become good at tennis, I'm not going to surround myself with a bunch of cocaine addicts, or heroin addicts, or drinkers, or whatever. It's just, and again, statistically, you do become an average of the people you surround yourself with, because eventually, it's like how affirmations work. If you tell yourself every morning that you're going to run a marathon, eventually you're going to run a fucking marathon. And again, if you've got people around you saying, "Oh, my life's so fucking miserable," blah, 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 you're going to become like that person, because it's what's going in here. And the subconscious is so powerful. So one of the biggest things I've learned, and this is, I think, a lot of people really struggle with this, is it's incredibly hard, but you have to take yourself out of the comfort zone. Nothing, depending on what you want from life. I know people are very happy with that, and if they're truly happy, I fully support that. And it's wonderful, because I'm someone who isn't necessarily content ever. And again, that's my addictive personality. But if you're wanting to grow, and as a person, whatever that might be, your hobbies, your career, your health, whatever, and you're complaining about it, and you still surround yourself with shit people, not doing the thing you want to do, well, you have to take a step back and think, okay, are these people actually aiding my goal? You know, and it sounds really cutthroat and, I guess, business-like, but I think, again, I'm someone who's always acted on impulse, and I just sort of do what I want when I want. I don't think about it. Even now, since I've been sober, and I've met a few people this year who said, "Oh, I think your life might be slightly better if you add a little bit of structure into it and take a step back and plan." And they're totally fucking right. And it's, I think we sort of, a lot of us, including myself, for the time I was doing, we trundle through life with our heads down. You know, we never really luck up. And people say, "Oh, UK, like, so miserable." People go to Manchester, "Oh, it's a really ugly city." It's not if you luck up. It's fucking beautiful, but because we spend all the time looking at the floor, because we're all sort of down. And so yeah, it's, surround yourself with the right people is so important, but it's so difficult. But if you look at the people who do it properly, they're the ones who are successful in whichever way they want to be successful.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a very, very good point. Another thing you touched on as well, and I think this is important for a musician. You highlighted it at the very start when you talked about sort of rock and roll, and you think about the rock stars and the excessive lifestyles that we've heard they lived at. And then obviously there's a long list of them that made it to 27 and not beyond. And the exact same thing is sort of prevalent within the jazz community as well. And the theme with any musician or with any artist is creativity. So, you know, I mean, it's strange how that level of addiction seems to go hand in hand with that level of creativity. How have you find creative? How did you find that at first? And how do you find it now that you are sober?
So one of the biggest things I was worried about was losing the music side of it, because and to this day, when I play the drums, it comes from pain. That's where my creativity comes from. And I think it does for a lot of artists. And it's a way of getting that out. It's like therapy again. And I actually wrote something, I recently read it from when I was 80 days sober. I wrote down every day for the first 100 days how I was feeling, and it was long enough to turn into a book. And one of the things I read in that was how I was so worried about losing that pain and what I'm going to do. And that's 80 days, you know, when people think, "Oh, fucking hell, I'm going to stop drinking for 30 days and it'll all be better." It's like, well, 80 days, I'm still suicidal. But yeah, so I just, again, trusted the evidence which other people showed me. People like Adrian say, "Look, honestly, look at me. I'm a few years sober and I'm playing the best I've ever fucking played and being really creative." And there's a lot of sober musicians out there who are famous. And a lot of people I knew who were sober who like were playing with all this fire and this energy and creativity, and I think, yeah, you can spark creativity out of drugs. But actually, all it really does, if you think what alcohol does, what does it actually do? It just numbs you. All the stuff we're talking about, confidence, it gives you this full sense. It's only because you're numb. It's because you don't feel anything. And surely creativity comes from feeling. That's where my creativity comes from. I'm feeling something inside. And so what I found after a long time, because you were saying, David, about the pathways in the brain and how that all rewires. When you stop, a friend told me this actually, when you stop smoking, it's like a lock and key thing. So when you stop having nicotine, you fumble around and everything's really difficult. It's hard to concentrate and all this shit. And it's because the nicotine receptor doesn't have the key to unlock it anymore. So your brain's fucked. And that could take a really long time to get over. And that's the same with drinking. I used to walk into a supermarket. I'd drive for 30 minutes to go to the supermarket. And I'd get there and I'd be like, why the fuck am I in the supermarket? I had no idea. And I'd drive home and I'd be like, shit, I really wanted whatever it was. And my brain just didn't function. But after enough time had passed for it to start recovering, I then found it was much easier to get the results I wanted, whether that's from playing. And I started really noticing improvements. Like I'd practice and I'd be able to go to a gig and just do it, which I'd never been able to do before. So shit, my brain's functioning much better because I'm not numb anymore and I'm actually learning things. And so my personal experience, I speak from my experience and the experience from other people telling me. Everything I'm talking about is my experience. I actually think substances, anything what numbs the brain pushes you further away because we all have it in here anyway. And it's just a way of unlocking it. And if you truly give a sober brain, a totally sober brain, and then remove all the things which alter the brain, that could even be food, you know, like all these little things we have going on, which we shouldn't really be consuming. Everything's become so clear and it's incredible. Like I remember I got to 6 months and I saw not the light, but, you know, I felt something. I was like, oh my God, I feel a little bit better. And I remember being in the car with someone after a gig. It's like the early hours of the morning, absolutely knackered normally. I was like, and I can feel it today. It gives me goosebumps. I was like, I felt like I'd taken so much cocaine. And I was totally fucking sober. And I had been for 6 months. And it was the best feeling. And I feel like that every fucking day. And yeah, life's fucking hard still. And it's really difficult. But the thing is, I have the clarity to whether that's to be creative, to deal with a problem, or whatever it is. My motorbike fucking falls over at the side of the road, it breaks down, you know, and I've had some situations caught out. And it's like, okay, normally I was like, go get a drink. And it's like now using that energy, if you take 10% of the energy it took to get fucking wasted all the time, to put into creativity, I personally, it's I have achieved way more. And I think anyone who's sober, successfully sober and have given it enough time, will tell you exactly the same thing. So yeah, that's my take on that.
That's interesting. That is interesting, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, it is. And I was going to say, when Adam first asked the question about creativity, and I think you've kind of probably answered it, is that actually maybe it's the other way around. Maybe those people that drink today, that they think they're making themselves creative. Actually, if they just didn't drink and do drugs, they'd perhaps be more creative because they'd have that freedom, and then that their mind would be clear. I mean, what's that? This is a crap analogy, but what's that film? Is it the Lego movie? The Lego movie, when the master Lego maker or whatever he's called, and he's told he has to go and clear his mind. And he goes up into the void and his mind is just empty. It's probably a crap analogy because I think that was because he was a bit dim. But anyway, he then did turn out that once he cleared his mind of all the clutter, he could then build anything because he had that clarity. And I think that's basically what you're saying, Jack. You put all these substances, and like you say, it's not just alcohol, it's not just drugs, it's sugar. And E numbers and all the other stuff we shove into our bodies continuously, and it's this brain up here when these have evolved, none of that crap was there. Yet we pump it all in and then somehow try to make ourselves believe that we're better because of it, when actually it's the opposite. And it sounds like you, Jack, or anyone that's been through how low you've been and how fucked up your head's been, to come out that other side is like, you know, I don't know if you can ever remember I think you said you were 14. So you would, before you became sober, you've never been a sober adult. So you probably can't relate to what it was like to be a sober adult, to see, you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, where was I before? You'll never know that, because you were never in that place.
No, and I remember when I first started to feel all right after getting sober, it was quite euphoric, because I'd literally walked down the street where I grew up and had been living for 25 years, and I'd notice a new tree, and I'd be like, fuck, I've never seen that tree before. And it was like being born again. So people who are taking LSD to fucking trip, just get sober, because you see loads of shit you've never seen before. So yeah, that is totally right. I don't remember much. I guess the things I remember before drinking and being intoxicated all the time were painful things. You know, I had a really bad time at school because I didn't want to be there. Stuff like half my family dying, all those things. So yeah, my adult life started really when I got sober. 25, 26 is when I really started feeling things, you know. And yeah, that's right. It's the clarity, and it's not having all these things flying around in your brain, because alcohol, cocaine, heroin, fucking all this shit, sugar, it's all poisonous to us, right? And your body, you put this into your body, and alcohol, it makes you throw up. Like heroin, the first time you take heroin, you're going to shit yourself. Like, your body's like, now what the fuck are you doing to me? It tries to get rid of it. So if you think how hard your body's working when you put anything in, it's like, well, that you're not going to be the most creative, are you? Like, logically, it doesn't make sense to me either now. But again, I've been on both sides of the fence. So I totally understand the people who say, no, you need all these things to be creative, because I've been that person. So I do understand it. But yeah, personally, who's had both experiences, very extreme ends, I'm definitely taking the side I'm on now. So.
Yeah, wow. I hadn't thought about that, but you're quite right. Even something like sugar, which you know has a negative effect on you, you know, and certainly I can tell you this. I've got two kids who are 5 and 7. If they've had too much, I can tell you all about that. Don't worry about that. Absolute nightmare, especially this time of night, when just as they're going to bed. So, speaking of going to bed, we'll put this episode to bed. We are around about the hour mark, which is where we like to wrap things up. So, Jack, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for a very honest and earnest description of your journey into sobriety and, you know, where you came from. I hope that people will find it not just interesting, but hopefully helpful, that maybe something that's been said tonight will resonate with them and they can take some benefit from it. Have you got any final thoughts that you wanted to leave us with?
I feel sorry that I've spoke about all the serious stuff. I'll tell you all the funny stories about sort of cocaine-fueled parties with prostitutes next time.
Definitely.
But no, if anyone hears this and can resonate to this, or resonates with this, and actually does, people say sometimes, oh, you're preaching. It's not, I'm just telling my story. And if it helps one person, that's wonderful, you know. It might actually save someone's life. And so, yeah, if you are struggling with stuff, just reach out to someone. There's plenty of access now to people on social media, on Instagram. Send someone a message if you don't know anyone to speak to in person, and ask for help. Because I tell you what, as shit as the human race can be sometimes, when you ask for help, we're actually a wonderful race of people. And people do really want to help you, especially in this community. So, yes, that's what I'll end on. But, yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, no, the pleasure's been all ours, hasn't it, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. It's been great to hear your story. And as Adam says, I'm sure there's people out there that are perhaps giving some thought to what they consume, whether that be alcohol, or drugs, and perhaps considering that they could temper that or abstain and change their lives in some way. And as you said, you said being on this podcast is like a therapy session for you, because it allows you to talk about it. And I guess that's reaffirming the decisions you make and how you feel and the way you live your life. So I'm grateful that we could be of assistance, but we're more than grateful for you to come on and share your story. And I do really appreciate it. Thank you, Jack.
Cheers, mate. Drop me your invoice. I'll send the money.
Fair play. Yeah, and I bet you didn't expect to be hearing about the Lego movie tonight either, did you? Cool. Well, we'll wrap it up now, and we'll wish you all a fond farewell. So thank you for listening, and we'll be back again next week when we will be talking about something entirely different again.